Hey friends. So we are now in lesson 4 of our somewhat long unit called quadratics. We're going to do a lot of stuff in this unit. Yesterday we dealt with a factored form. Okay, so we dealt with the factored form, but we also kind of walked through how to draw the graph based on the points that we got. And we got points from factoring it. We got points from, how did we get points from factoring it? Those were the x-intercepts, right? We set each factor equal to 0, and then we could solve for the x-intercepts from there, right? Because the value of y on the x-axis is always 0. Okay, and then we got the y-intercept, so we could plot that, and then we got the vertex from the axis of symmetry and from the max min point, right? The axis of symmetry was the x value of your vertex, and the max or min point was the y value of your vertex. So that gave you another point. Plot all those points and go to town. Okay. So what we're going to do today now is look at quadratic equations when we don't actually have the full equation, or when we have a more complicated equation. So we're going to look at how to read information off of tables and how to get some of that information off our graphing calculator as well if it gets too messy. Okay. All right, so let's start here. When we aren't given an equation of the function or a graph, we may be asked to work with a table of values. I'm just going to hide my head while I read that there. Each table of values lists points in a quadratic function. Decide without graphing the direction in which the parabola opens, the axis of symmetry, and the maximum or minimum value. So we're going to answer those 3 questions in that order. We're going to talk about the direction, we're going to talk about the axis of symmetry, and we're going to talk about the max or min. Okay, so take a look at this. X is going from -4 to -3 to -2 to -1. So what I need you to see there is this is like our eyes are scanning from the left to the right of the table. Okay, left to the right of the table, or left to the right of the graph. Okay, so what I want you to notice, and actually we could just draw it out for a second. Okay, if I went and said, okay, at -4, I'm at 12, okay? And at -3, I'm at 5. And at -2, I'm at 0. And at -1, I'm at -3. And at 0, I'm at -4. And at 1, I'm at -3. So what I want you to notice there is I'm going down, 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 and then from that last -4 to -3, I turn direction. So that tells us that this graph is opening up. So the y values start descending, and then after x equals 0, begin ascending. This tells me the graph opens up. Okay. All right, the next thing to talk about is the axis of symmetry. Now, remember yesterday, we talked about the fact that we could get the axis of symmetry if we knew 2 points on the same horizontal. So what I would want you to do is look at the table, find me 2 points that have the same y value. Okay. We can see them right here. We've got -3, -1 comma -3, and 1 comma -3. So both of those points have the same y value of -3. Okay. So we talked yesterday that we can take the average. So the axis of symmetry will be, I'm going to add those 2 things together, -1 plus 1, right? I'm adding the x values together. -1 plus 1 is actually 0. And then when I take 0 divided by 2, I get 0. So the axis of symmetry is at x equals 0. And now that also tells me that my maximum or my minimum point will be at 0. And it tells me that the vertex is at x equals 0. Okay, so I've actually got the information I need for the last question, which was what is the vertex? I look for the spot where x equals 0 on this one because that's the axis of symmetry. Not because it's a y-intercept, but it's because it's the axis of symmetry. Okay, it just happens to also be the y-intercept. Okay, and so I say the graph has a minimum value at -4. A minimum value at 4, because I was asked for the max or min, so you have to state whether it's a max or min, and then state the y value as well. Okay, and then just for clarification, two things. I'm going to hide my face so you see that pink question. Just make sure my head's not in the way there. And then second, I want to just bring home the point that this right here, an x value of 0, a y value of -4. You were asked for the axis of symmetry, and you were asked for the max or min. You've answered both of those questions, but those create the vertex. So we can also say the vertex is at bracket 0, -4. Okay. All right, good work. Let's try another graph. So take a look at this one. Again, you can see that as my x's go up, that means I'm reading left to right on the graph. This one I'm going to try not to plot. We're just going to read the numbers. So I'm from -13 to -3, I'm going up. Then I'm going up again. Follow my mouse. I'm going up. I'm going up. I'm going down. So I'm going up, 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 and then I go down. Okay, so that graph opens down. Okay, after x equals 3, I'm just going to hide myself again for a sec. After x equals 3, it will begin descending. So that tells me that the graph opens down. Is that okay? All right, to get the axis of symmetry, I need the average of 2 points that the y value is the same. So I'm looking for 2 points that the y value is the same. I could actually take the 3 here, or I could take the -3. It doesn't matter. Okay, either one will get me there. I chose to take the -3. So I'm going to take the average between 1 and 5. 1 plus 5 is 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So I know that I have an axis of symmetry at x equals 3. My graph opens down, so I'll have a maximum point. And I know my maximum point will be located at the vertex, and I know the x value of the vertex is at 3. So I just have to figure out the y value that goes with the 3. Well, that's actually in my table right here. It's 3, 5. So I know that I have a maximum at 5. Maximum at 5. Okay. All right. Now, a partial table of values for the function is given below. Again, I'm going to hide my big old head for a sec just to make sure you've got it all. Okay, and I'm back. We're going to sketch the graph. So if you have your workbook with you, you have a little grid that you can draw these on. Okay, I know you might not know exactly where 2.88 is, but just kind of do your best. Okay, it's just underneath the 3 mark. Here's a picture that, remember, you're going to pause me and do this and then come back, right? I'm not going to wait for you to draw it. So welcome back. Mine is, looks like this. So this is what your graph should roughly look like. Okay, now we're going to answer some questions based on that. So first question, determine the axis of symmetry. Well, again, I would be looking for 2 spots where my y value is the same. I see that with the 18.72. So I want to take the average of those 2 spots, 12 plus 3, divided by 2, that's going to give me 12.5. Okay, and then determine the maximum or minimum. Well, I know it's located at x equals 12.5, so I can read it right off of here. And I know my graph is going down, so I have a maximum. So I'm going to have a maximum at 18.75. Okay. And very quickly, we'll go through kind of the same sorts of stuff that we were going through with yesterday. The y-intercept. Well, I know the x value is 0 for the y-intercept, so I see that right here. The y-intercept is 0, 0. We've already talked about the fact that it opens down. We've already talked about the fact that the axis of symmetry is at x equals 12.5. And we've already talked about the fact that it has a maximum value at 18.75. Okay, so those ones I'm just listing here because we've already talked about them. The domain will be real, like all parabolas. And then the range, I know that this graph opens down, so I'm going to be less than whatever the maximum point is. And the maximum point was at 18.75. So I'm going to say all the values of y such that y is less than or equal to 18.75. Y is a member of the reals. Okay. Awesome. Okay, let's try another one. We're going to look at a graph in this orientation instead, going down instead of across, but it's the same thing. Pause me, try and draw it. You have a grid provided to you. Okay, here's what your graph should have looked like. Now, we're going to answer the same questions. Okay, so first question was find the axis of symmetry. Again, on this table, we would be looking for y values that are the same. I can see a -4 and a -4. I could have also used the -3 and the -3, or the -1 and the -1. I would have gotten the exact same answer when I take the average of those specific x values. I'm going to take the average of 0.5 and 0.75, so I'm going to add them together and divide by 2, and that's going to give me 0.625. So I know that the axis of symmetry is at x equals 0.625. Okay. Now I need the maximum or the minimum. Well, we know this graph was opening up, so I know I have a bottom or a minimum, and I know it's going to be at the vertex, the y value of the vertex, and I know the x value of the vertex because that's my axis of symmetry. So now I'm looking at the point that has an x value of 0.625. I can say that my minimum is at -4.125. I just took it right off the graph there. Okay, so minimum at -4.125. Okay, so now we're going to answer the same sorts of questions with it. Most of them we've already covered. The y-intercept, I need an x value of 0, so I'm looking at my table. There's my x value of 0. Y-intercept is at 0, -1. Opens up, we've already talked about that. Axis of symmetry is at x equals 0.625. We've already talked about that one. The max or min value, the minimum, is at -4.125. We've already talked about that. The domain of all parabolas is real, and then we just have to figure out the range. So we know this graph opens up, and so we're going to have a greater than or equal to the minimum point. So y is greater than or equal to -4.125. Okay, see, this one isn't bad. All right, awesome. Now, what might be some of the challenges to determining x-intercepts or making a table of values for f of x equals -4.9x squared plus 15x plus 1? What I want you to see here is if you start plugging in like 1 for x and 2 for x, that's how we make a table of values, right? Your numbers get very kind of messy, okay? And when they're messy, they're harder to graph. So what I want to do with this one is I want to walk you through how to find these things using technology, okay? So what I'd like you to do is we're going to put this in your graphing calculator, and I'm going to do this one with you on a Casio. We're going to use technology to sketch the graph, determine the max or mins, and determine the x-intercepts, okay? So if you have a TI, you can still follow along. I'll help you as we go. And then I'm going to show the Casio. So just give me 1 sec to switch to my graphing calculator. Just have to find it here. There we go. Okay, and so to get into your graphing feature, I know we've done this once or twice before. To get into your graphing feature, you're going to go to menu, which is what I'm showing you, and then graph. On most of the newer models, that's option 5. On the old 9750s, that's option 3, okay? And so here we are. If you're a TI, you would have pressed Y equals button, and that's right up here, okay? So now I want you to type in the equation that we were looking at, which was negative. Remember, your calculator understands the difference between a subtraction sign and a negative sign, so just be careful with that. -4.9 x squared plus 15x and plus 1 was the graph that we were going to do. Okay, and then I just hit execute to keep that function stored there. Okay, at any point in time, if I was typing and I didn't want it, I could press exit and it wouldn't actually store the graph there. Okay, so now I'm going to draw. And here is my graph so far, but I need to adjust my window settings, hey? Now, looking at what I have, I probably can take my x min to maybe -1 to 4 is probably fine. And then my y's, I just need to go up a bit. So right now I go to 10. Let's see if 15 might work. So I'm going to go to my window settings. So shift window. And I'm going to take that to negative, what did I say? Let's go -2 to 5. And then let's take this guy and maybe go up to 15 and see if that gets me where I want. I'm going to just change my scale to 2 there just so I don't have as many lines. Okay, so that's a pretty decent graph, okay? Now, just for clarification, because I was pressing buttons without talking, after you adjust your window settings, you just press exit and redraw. Okay, and then for TIs, you have a window button. You can do the same thing, and then you just go back to pressing the graph button to get back to your picture. Okay, so we were asked for the maximum or minimum and the intercept. So I'm going to just quickly walk you through how to do that on a Casio and on a TI. Okay, the max or the min, everything you need to solve for on a Casio is in the G-solve feature, which is your F5 button right here. Okay, so press F5 and you get a menu. If I want the max, take a look. There's a max right there. So that's F2. So you're going to press F2 and it takes you to the max. Okay, 1.5306, blah, 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 12.4789, maybe 59. Now, you are asked in the question, I know you don't have the question in front of you maybe, but you are asked to round to the nearest 10th. Okay, so we will, that's one. Oh, I lied to you. Sorry, I'm reading the question here. You were not asked to round to the nearest 10th. We'll go to the 100th place. Okay, we'll go to 2 decimal places. So 1.53, 12.47 is the vertex. Now, you were asked for the maximum value. So the maximum value will just be a max at 12.48, actually, sorry, because I think that guy's a 9. If I look real close with my old man eyes. Okay. Now, on a TI, you do a similar process. You have a calculate feature, which is the second option of your trace button. So you'll go second trace, and then you'll calculate the max, but it asks you a couple of questions on a TI. So the first question it asks you is left bound. All that means is you're gonna press your left button until this little blinking thing is somewhere to the left of the maximum point that you want, and hit enter. Then it will ask you for right bound. And so you'll press the right button until your cursor is over to the right of the hump, and then hit enter. And then it'll ask you if you want to guess, and you don't care about that, so you hit enter one more time, and then it'll give you the same thing. Okay. Okay, I'm also going to show you the x-intercepts. Now, the y-intercept you already know, right? Because you're in general form. And so the graph, the constant term of this graph was 1, so you know the y-intercepts are 0, 1. But the x-intercepts, on a Casio, those are called roots. So you go G-solve and you ask for the root. It will take you to the one on the left right away. Okay, so that's 0.07. And then if you just click your right button, it'll jump to the next one for you. So that's 3.13. Okay. On a TI, there's a couple different ways to do this on a TI. I'm going to go with what I think the easiest way is. If you go to a different teacher and they tell you something else, that's totally fine. If you know how to do that, go for it. I think the easiest way to do this is to go into your y equals. And in y2, put y2 as 0. Okay, and then you're going to solve for the intersection point on a TI. So TI kids, if you're still with me, go to y2 equals 0 and come back to your graph. Then you're going to go and find the intersection. So you're going to go second trace, and then option 5 is your intersect. Put your cursor to the one you want, close to the one you want. It doesn't have to be right on it, but just close. And hit enter, enter, enter. And it'll give you that one. Then you got to go through the process again. So you go second trace 5, but now move your cursor to the other one and hit enter, enter, enter. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. And we finished this question, but I have pictures here just to show you. So we'll just quickly show you. Here is my drawing of it. And then if I wanted to get the maximum or minimum values on a Casio, I press F5, F2. On a TI, I went second trace 4, and then I answered the questions for left bound, for right bound, and to guess. Okay. And then if I wanted the intercepts, oh yeah, so maximum at 12.48. I should answer the question too. Hey, my big old head might be in the way there. Let me just hide myself for a quick sec. Okay. And then if we wanted the intercepts, I would go on a Casio, F5, F1, and then on a TI, I need to go y2 is 0, and then go second trace 5 and press enter, enter, enter. Okay. And then those intercepts were 0, 1 was the y-intercept. I didn't calculate that one. I just knew it from my equation. I'm just going to hide myself again for a sec. Negative 0.07 and 3.13 for the x-intercepts. Remember that when I ask you for intercepts, they have to be as a coordinate pair. Okay. So that was a little review of graphing technology as well. And that finishes up our little time together today. So here is your homework. If you're my kid at school, you can go through this today. And then tomorrow, very exciting, the next lesson we're going to talk about is vertex form of a quadratic. So I know you're all going to lose sleep tonight because I told you it was so exciting, but we will tackle that next. In the meantime, make sure you're doing your homework, make sure you're showing me your steps, and make sure you're asking me questions. You got this, guys. Take care.